An ex-firefighter helps a humble girl in danger, unaware she's a millionaire heiress, hiding a secret. What happens next changes their lives forever. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. The rain hadn't let up for hours, pouring down in relentless sheets across the deserted outskirts of Raleigh, North Carolina. In the dim glow of a single streetlight, Gracie Montgomery, though she wasn't using that last name right now, stood by her compact sedan, staring in despair at the flat tire. Her long, wavy brown hair was plastered to her cheeks, and rivulets of water trailed down the collar of her simple jacket. She was 34, petite at 5'5", and trembling not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took a shaky breath and glanced at her phone. No messages, no return calls. She felt as though the entire world had abandoned her on this sodden stretch of road. The thought of calling her father, Thomas Montgomery, wealthy magnate and reason for her current predicament, flashed across her mind. But she shoved it away with grim determination. She'd made a choice to run, to escape the marriage he was forcing upon her, and she wasn't about to back down now. But oh, how she wished she knew how to change a tire in the middle of this storm. Suddenly, headlights swept across the narrow side street. A pickup truck came to a slow halt behind her car. The driver's side door opened, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man of about 42. He wore a heavy flannel shirt, its sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and a dark baseball cap. His short, sandy blonde hair curled faintly at the edges from the damp air. The man approached with a look of concern etched onto his face. "Ma'am," he called out over the roar of rainfall. "Everything all right?" For a second, Gracie hesitated. She could feel her heart pounding. Normally, she'd refuse help from a stranger, especially in a deserted place like this. But there was something about his steady gaze and the gentle set of his mouth that put her slightly at ease. She nodded toward the useless tire. "Flat," she murmured, swallowing her pride, "and I can't seem to fix it on my own." He stepped closer, the rain pelting both of them. "I'm Bryce." "Bryce Jenkins," he offered. He reached out a hand, and Gracie noticed how his eyes flicked over her drenched form with genuine worry. "Let me take a look." Bryce moved swiftly, retrieving a lug wrench and a jack from his truck. As he crouched down by her front wheel, Gracie wrapped her arms around herself and peered into the shadows cast by the meager streetlight. That was when she noticed two figures across the road. They were men, leaning against a chain-link fence, their faces partially hidden by the night. She felt a prickle of unease as one of them stared her way. One of the men took a few steps forward, and Gracie's stomach tightened. Bryce, still bent over the tire, seemed unaware of the onlookers. She opened her mouth to warn him, but just then, the men swaggered closer, their voices carrying a taunting edge. "Hey there, sweetheart," one called out. "You alone tonight?" Gracie's pulse sped up. She clutched her jacket, trying to hide her shaking hands. Bryce rose to his feet, his expression darkening. Standing at nearly 6 feet tall, his robust frame was suddenly imposing. He placed himself between Gracie and the strangers. "That's enough," Bryce said, a hint of steel in his voice. "She's with me. Step back." The men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their chances. A flicker of annoyance passed over their faces, but faced with Bryce's firm stance, they muttered a few choice words before moving off into the rainy darkness. Only once they disappeared did Gracie allow herself to exhale. Bryce turned back to her, his eyes scanning for any sign of harm. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Fear and relief tangled inside her. "I'm all right." "Thanks to you." He finished changing the tire, then gestured to his truck. "It's pouring too hard. Let me at least get you somewhere dry." She hesitated. She didn't even know this man, but the kindness in his expression wore down her defenses. Gracie slipped into the passenger side of his truck, water dripping onto the seat. Bryce turned the heat on full blast, the interior lights revealing her tear-streaked face. It was a moment of raw vulnerability she hadn't planned on showing anyone, yet as the old truck rumbled away, she felt an odd flicker of comfort. This stranger had treated her with more respect than the people she'd trusted her entire life. She only told him her first name, Gracie, and in the hush between them, as the windshield wipers battled the storm, neither realized this rescue would spark a bond that could change everything. The storm still rattled the windows when Bryce pulled up in front of a small, warmly lit cafe on a quiet Raleigh street. The sign above the door read, Marilyn's Coffee Haven, its letters flickering in the downpour. Gracie peered through the windshield, her eyes red from stress but also shining with cautious hope. She'd been alone all night, yet somehow a stranger's compassion had offered her a sliver of safety. Bryce turned off the engine and glanced at her. It's not much, but Marilyn serves a hot cup of coffee and the best blueberry muffins in town. Figure we can get you dried off while you wait for someone. His hesitation didn't escape her. He must have realized she was trying to call family or friends, and none had answered. Gracie managed a half smile and nodded. She gripped the door handle and stepped out into the drizzle, water splashing around her ankles. Her jacket was still soaked through, and her hair clung to her shoulders. Inside, the cafe glowed under soft yellow lights. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sweet pastries. A middle-aged woman with a warm, rounded face bustled out from behind the counter. She wore a cheery floral apron and called out, "Bryce Jenkins, you're out late. Who's this poor thing with you?" "Evening, Marilyn," Bryce replied. "This here is Gracie. She had some car trouble. Mind if we sit a while?" "Of course not. You two come right in, sit next to the heater." Marilyn's tone overflowed with genuine concern as she hurried to grab a couple of towels. "Bless your hearts, the weather's a nightmare." Gracie's cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to such open kindness from strangers, at least not the uncomplicated kind. Taking the towel, she dried her arms and face, trying to regain some composure. Bryce shrugged off his jacket, placing it over the back of a chair, and invited Gracie to sit. She sank down, grateful for the comforting warmth of the cafe's old radiator. After Marilyn brought 2 mugs of steaming coffee, she gave them some space. Gracie curled her hands around the cup, absorbing the heat. The rain beat against the windows, creating a steady rhythm that matched her nervous heartbeat. She realized Bryce was watching her, his gaze steady but not invasive. "How are you holding up?" he asked. She stared at the rising steam. "I'm okay. My phone died earlier, so I couldn't reach anyone. And when I finally borrowed a charger at a gas station, nobody picked up." Her lips trembled slightly, betraying her frustration. "I'm sure they're just busy," Bryce nodded, though concern flickered across his face. "If you need me to call anyone, I can—" Gracie forced a small smile. She wasn't ready to reveal her real identity or the chaotic reason behind her flight. "It's all right. Thank you for offering." She took a careful sip, savoring the warmth. "This is really good coffee." "I'm not kidding about Marilyn's brew," Bryce replied, smiling softly. "It's my favorite spot in town." She tried to relax, letting the cafe's cozy atmosphere lull her troubled thoughts. The walls were decorated with photographs of local events, small festivals, community gatherings, the Raleigh Firefighters charity run. One picture featured Bryce standing with a group of uniformed firefighters, all grinning proudly. Gracie's eyes lingered on it. Noticing her interest, he cleared his throat. "I used to be a firefighter," he explained. "Left the department a few years back." He didn't elaborate, and she chose not to pry. Yet she caught the flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps sadness, perhaps regret. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Marilyn reappeared with a fresh pot of coffee. She insisted Gracie try a slice of apple pie on the house, then left them with a gentle smile. Gracie's phone buzzed once, an unknown caller. Her heart leapt, but when she answered, the line was silent before cutting out. Was it her father's people? She shivered, imagining the lengths they might go to bring her home. Bryce leaned forward, concern etched on his brow. "Everything all right?" She forced a light shrug. "Just a missed call." The hush that followed was thick with unspoken fears. Despite everything, Gracie felt oddly protected in this snug corner of the world. For the first time in hours, maybe days, she allowed herself to imagine that she could handle what came next, even if it meant building a new life, far from the Montgomery name. And all because of a stranger who cared enough to stop on a rainy rally night. Dawn brought a pale, greyish light filtering through the cafe's windows. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, tapping against the glass like restless fingers. Gracie sat at a small table near the window, finishing the last crumbs of the apple pie she'd eaten hours earlier. Her thoughts roamed between gratitude for Bryce's kindness and the stark truth that she shouldn't involve him too deeply in her complicated life. Bryce stood a few feet away, chatting quietly with Marilyn about the battered roads and damaged power lines from the overnight storm. When he glanced over at Gracie, she quickly dropped her gaze, unsure whether to keep her distance or show more appreciation. The night had been too strange, too revelatory. No one had ever gone out of their way for her like he had, at least not without an ulterior motive. She finally rose from her seat, smoothing the wrinkles in her damp jacket. Bryce excused himself from Marilyn and walked over. "I can drive you home if you'd like," he offered, voice low so the other patrons wouldn't overhear. Gracie's heart tightened. She'd slipped earlier and admitted she wasn't from Raleigh. I don't really have a place here," she said softly. "I was supposed to meet someone, but they never showed." His brow furrowed. "If you need a ride to a friend's or relative's house..." She cut him off with a polite shake of her head. The thought of him dropping her at some hotel or random intersection made her stomach churn. Yet telling him the truth was even more terrifying. He'd see her as a spoiled runaway, or worse, a fraud. "Thank you, really," she murmured, "but I can't ask you to do more." A flicker of hurt crossed his features. "You're not asking, I'm offering." At that moment, two elderly women who'd been sipping coffee by the counter headed for the door, giving Gracie a curious look. She realized the small cafe crowd knew something was amiss. She felt the burn of their well-meaning concern. Taking a steadying breath, Gracie forced a polite smile. "You've done enough already." She could feel a knot forming in her throat. She hated the idea of pushing him away, but letting him get closer seemed dangerous. "I'll figure out my next steps on my own." Bryce studied her for a moment. There was no anger in his expression, only a reluctant acceptance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. "Well, if you change your mind," he scribbled something. "This is the address of my auto repair shop on the north side, and my cell number. I own Jenkins Auto, just a small place. I usually open by 8. Gracie took the note with trembling fingers. She stared at it briefly, torn. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with restrained emotion. He gave a single nod. "Take care, Gracie." With that, he headed toward the door. She watched him leave, the bells above the cafe entrance jingling softly in his wake. An unexpected ache formed in her chest. She tried to shake it off, attributing it to exhaustion or the stress of the last 24 hours. But once he was gone, she felt a void, as though some sense of safety had vanished along with him. She slumped back into the chair, noticing Marilyn's watchful eyes. The woman approached cautiously, setting a hand on Gracie's shoulder. "Honey," Marilyn said in a gentle tone, "you need a place to rest. My spare room upstairs might not be fancy, but—" "No, that's sweet of you, but—" Gracie swallowed, shaking her head. "I'll just wait a little longer to see if someone contacts me." Marilyn nodded, sympathy written all over her face. She didn't pry further, and Gracie was thankful for that. Moments later, Marilyn returned to the counter, leaving Gracie alone with her swirling thoughts. Outside, the drizzle continued. Gracie realized she was more afraid than ever, afraid of trusting Bryce too much, afraid of the secret she was keeping. It felt safer to stand on her own, yet her heart clamored for genuine connection. She'd run from a life dictated by other people's decisions. Letting someone else get close felt like handing over the reins again. But in Bryce's presence, she'd tasted a kindness she could hardly deny. That was the part that scared her the most. A few hours later, the sky had shifted from grey to a washed-out blue, though the air still smelled of rain. Gracie decided she couldn't wait indefinitely for a family member who might never show. Checking her phone, she saw no new messages. The silent screen mocked her fears and hopes alike. Maybe her father had finally decided to give her the cold shoulder, punishment for leaving, or maybe this was just another strategic move to force her back on her own. Summoning courage, she dialed the contact number Bryce had given her. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. She hesitated, listening to his brief recorded greeting, feeling oddly shy. After the beep, she left a hurried message. "Hi, Bryce. It's Gracie. I might need help getting my car fully checked. It's still acting strange after the flat. If it's okay, I'll stop by your shop." She ended the call, unsure if it sounded too casual or too desperate. She arrived at Jenkins' Auto on foot about an hour later, having caught a short ride from a passerby who recognized the cafe's name and helped direct her. Nestled between a hardware store and a defunct diner, the auto shop was modest. A faded sign bore the name Jenkins Auto Repair. Inside the open garage bay, Gracie found Bryce hunched over an engine, grease on his hands, a focused frown on his face. He glanced up, clearly surprised. "Gracie, didn't expect to see you so soon." She bit her lip. "I tried calling." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Phone must still be on silent. Sorry. Everything all right?" She nodded, though she knew her eyes betrayed her worry. My car's making noises." "I'm not sure what's wrong." Bryce motioned for her to bring the sedan in. She handed him the keys, watching as he backed the car into the garage carefully. While he inspected under the hood, Gracie hovered near the entrance, unsure if she should speak. At last, he straightened, resting his arm on the frame. "Looks like it might be more than a tire issue," he said. "Could be the alignment. Maybe some damage from hitting a pothole. I'll need a few hours to check properly." "All right," she agreed, relieved but also aware she had nowhere else to go in the meantime. "I can wait around." He shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Sure, we've got a small lounge area. Coffee machine's old but works." Then, softer, "You sure you're okay?" The gentle question pulled at her emotions. She mustered a thin smile. "Yes, just a little stressed." Bryce gave a slight nod. "The lounge is through that door. I'll give you an update soon," yet the tension between them was as thick as the scent of motor oil. Gracie felt the rope pulling in two directions, independence versus accepting his help. She managed to relax only slightly in the cramped waiting area, where a mismatched couch and a worn coffee table bore ancient car magazines. She forced herself to flip through one, half listening to the soft clanks of tools from the garage. Soon, Bryce peeked in, his expression pensive. "Mind if we talk for a minute?" She set the magazine aside. Sure, he took a breath. I don't mean to pry, but I'd be lying if I said I'm not worried. Seeing you so alone last night, then hearing nothing about your family, I get the sense you're running from something. His voice was kind but insistent. You don't have to tell me, but if there's trouble, I might be able to help. Her chest tightened. The paternalistic part of her bristled, wanting to say she could handle everything, but the tenderness in his gaze made her pause. It's complicated, she murmured, dropping her eyes. I appreciate your concern, but it's just, I can't talk about it. Not yet. Bryce nodded slowly, disappointment flickering across his face before he hid it. All right, I won't push. He rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling a low sigh. For what it's worth, I know what it's like to leave things behind. Gracie studied him, sensing a deeper story. She wondered what ghosts haunted him but didn't feel she had the right to ask. The rope of tension felt tighter than ever, each of them on opposite ends, each afraid to close the gap. Part of her yearned to tell him everything, to confess her last name, the marriage she'd escaped, and the inheritance she no longer wanted. But fear strangled her voice. She was barely learning to stand on her own. Trusting someone else's support felt dangerously unfamiliar. By late afternoon, the rain clouds had scattered, leaving a tentative sunshine over Raleigh. Jenkins' auto was quieter now. Bryce had finished inspecting Gracie's sedan, confirming it needed alignment work and a couple of new parts. It would be drivable by tomorrow at the earliest. Gracie sat on a stool in the garage, arms wrapped around herself, the faint smell of rubber and engine oil filling the air. She hadn't planned on staying in Raleigh this long, but fate seemed to be pointing her toward a longer detour. Bryce emerged from beneath the car, wiping his hands on a rag. I can order the parts, have 'em by morning. You'll need a place to stay tonight. Gracie stiffened. The idea of imposing on him again felt embarrassing, but the alternative, calling her father or returning to the family estate, was unthinkable. She wasn't ready to confront anyone from her old life. I'll find a motel, she said, trying to sound confident. He rested a hand on his hip, studying her with genuine concern. Liz, she's an old friend who runs a small inn on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. She's always looking for part-time help at the reception desk, if you're needing a job or something. Her eyes flicked up in surprise. A job? She couldn't deny that her finances were trickier than usual. She'd left the Montgomery house abruptly, refusing to touch the credit cards that would reveal her location. She only had a bit of cash and a single debit account she hoped her father hadn't frozen. Uncertainty flickered across her face. I'm not sure, but I guess I could talk to her. Bryce nodded. I can give you her number or drive you over. Up to you. She sensed his careful approach. He was extending help without smothering her, which touched her more deeply than she'd admit. That would be kind, she said softly. Thank you. They locked up the shop a short while later. Gracie followed Bryce in his truck, the windows down to let in the fresh post-rain breeze. The Carolina pines glistened under the sun's renewed glow. It almost felt like a new day, despite her lingering anxieties. Soon, they arrived at a quaint, two-story inn named the Oak and Maple Inn. A homely sign swung gently in the breeze, and the surrounding flower beds looked lovingly tended. Bryce parked and turned to Gracie, handing her a small card. Liz's number. She's expecting you. Tell her I sent you, and she'll figure something out. Even if the job doesn't fit, she'll have a room for you. Gracie placed the card in her jacket pocket, feeling a rush of gratitude. She opened her mouth to say something, anything that might convey how thankful she was, but her throat felt tight. Bryce cleared his throat, glancing at the inn's front steps. All right, well, I should head back to the shop. I've got some paperwork to do before closing. Impulsively, Gracie reached out and touched his arm. Bryce, Her voice shook with sincerity. I owe you a lot. You've been kind, and I wish I could tell you everything, but... He placed a gentle hand over hers. You don't owe me anything, Gracie. I can see you're going through something big. I've got my own baggage, so I understand if it takes time to open up. A small, reassuring smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No pressure, all right? She nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. It had been so long since anyone treated her with a genuine, no-strings-attached kindness. All right, she whispered. She slipped out of the truck, and Bryce waited until she was safely at the inn's front door. Through the glass, she watched him drive away, her heart unexpectedly heavy at the sight of his pickup disappearing down the lane. Inside, a tall, warm-looking woman with dark hair streaked with grey greeted her from behind a reception desk. You must be Gracie, she said, smiling kindly. Bryce told me a bit about you. I'm Liz. Let's get you settled, honey. And so, Gracie took that first unsteady step toward a new life, still filled with uncertainty, but buoyed by the faint promise that in Raleigh she might truly find herself. There, in that modest inn, she sensed a glimmer of hope growing amid her tangled fears. Liz's welcoming smile was the first thing Gracie saw when she opened her eyes the next morning. The older woman, 55 and practical in both manner and dress, stood at the doorway of a cozy guest room with a steaming mug in hand. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the warm browns and creams of the oak and maple inn's decor. Morning, honey, Liz said, entering with careful steps. Hope you slept all right. Bryce told me you'd be staying for a bit. She set the mug down on a small nightstand. It's just chamomile tea, but it's good for easing the nerves. Gracie pushed herself up against the pillows, cheeks flushing slightly. Thank you for everything. I wasn't sure where else to go. Liz brushed off the gratitude with a wave of her hand. That's what we do here. Help each other when times get rough. I've known Bryce since he was a fresh-faced 20-year-old. Back when he was training to be a firefighter, he's always had that protective streak. At the mention of Bryce, Gracie glanced away. She still felt awkward about the circumstances that had brought her here. Liz noticed and offered a gentle pat on Gracie's arm. He didn't say much about your situation, she continued, and I didn't ask. Figured if you wanted to share, you would. The important thing is you're safe. Now, if you're up for it, I could use some help around the inn. Nothing fancy, checking in guests, tidying the reception desk. You'll earn a bit of pocket money. The idea of working in a normal environment, something she'd never truly done before, both excited and scared her. I'd like that, Gracie said quietly, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The chamomile's comforting scent steadied her. Liz nodded, satisfied. Why don't you come down in half an hour? I'll show you around, introduce you to Samantha, one of my regular staff. She paused, her eyes thoughtful. No matter what brought you to Raleigh, you're here now. That can be the start of something good, if you let it. Gracie felt an unexpected lump in her throat. Her own mother had passed years ago, and she'd never felt truly guided by any strong maternal figure after that. Liz's calm assurance soothed her in a way she couldn't quite describe. She simply nodded again, hoping her gratitude was clear. True to her word, Liz gave Gracie a proper tour later that morning. They wandered through the inn's charming hallways, past framed photographs of local milestones, an annual chili cook-off, a downtown arts festival, a group of firefighters posing in front of a fire engine. Gracie caught sight of Bryce's familiar face in one of those pictures, a bright smile lighting his features as he stood beside fellow crew members. A pang of curiosity tugged at her. She knew almost nothing about him, aside from his kindness and the fact that he'd once risked his life for others. In the lobby, Samantha, a lean and energetic woman around 30, greeted Gracie with a friendly grin. "Glad to have someone new to chat with. The inn's not always busy, but we keep it well maintained." She handed Gracie a neat stack of flyers advertising a local autumn fair. "We pin these on the front desk to let guests know about events." Gracie followed Samantha's lead, learning how to check reservations on an old computer system and respond to phone inquiries. Though there were moments of confusion, especially when the phone rang with a caller asking peculiar questions about extended stays, Gracie found herself adapting surprisingly quickly. With each task, she felt a small spark of pride. She was doing something on her own, something not orchestrated by her family's money or connections. Liz periodically stopped by to offer encouraging words. "Remember, half of running an inn is making folks feel at home," she told Gracie. A warm smile and a bit of genuine concern go a long way. Late that afternoon, as Gracie folded fresh towels, a text appeared on her phone from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Stop ignoring us." Her heart jolted. She imagined it was from her father's circle or someone determined to drag her back. Her hand trembled briefly, but she forced a steady breath and slipped the phone into her pocket. Liz's words echoed in her mind, the start of something good. Maybe it was time to let that seed of hope take root, no matter who tried to disturb it. She returned to her tasks, determined to learn from Liz's quiet strength. There was a sense of purpose in the air now, and though her old fears lingered, Gracie realized she might finally have a mentor who truly believed she could stand on her own. On a crisp morning 2 days later, Gracie slipped into the modest uniform Liz had provided, a light blue polo shirt embroidered with the Oaken Maple Inn logo and plain black slacks. It felt strange wearing attire that signified she was, in fact, a working staff member. Yet there was a subtle thrill in it, no pretenses, no extravagance. She took her place behind the reception desk, greeting an older couple who were checking out. They smiled at her, asking about local breakfast spots. Gracie handed them a small brochure Liz had put together, listing her favorite diners and bakeries around Raleigh. The couple thanked her warmly and departed, leaving Gracie with a sense of fulfillment far beyond anything she'd felt at the fancy galas and fundraisers her father used to host. Later that morning, she looked up from her computer to see Bryce entering the lobby, holding a small toolbox. He offered a tentative wave. "Hey there, Liz said the water heater downstairs was acting up." Gracie felt her cheeks warm. "Hi, it's good to see you." Then she added quickly, I'm glad you're here to fix it." She mentally kicked herself, noticing the amused tilt of his lips. "Good to see you too," he said, dipping his head respectfully. "Looks like you're settling in." She smiled, hoping it wasn't too bright. "Yeah. Liz keeps me busy." The truth was, she'd been grateful for the distraction from her anxious thoughts. Throwing herself into tasks, inventory, phone duty, restocking the lobby had helped her focus on the present instead of the uncertain future. Bryce disappeared into the basement, where the inn's water heater sat in a dimly lit corner. Curiosity eventually got the better of Gracie, and she followed to see if he needed an extra hand. She found him crouched by the large metal tank, fiddling with valves and wrenches. "Everything all right?" she ventured. He glanced over his shoulder. "So far, so good. Just a worn-out gasket. Should be a quick fix." A faint grin flickered across his face. "You didn't have to come down here. The basement's not exactly a tourist spot." Gracie shrugged lightly. "I wanted to see if I could help. I'm learning to do new things. Figure this might be a skill worth watching." She grimaced, "Though I'm not sure I'm a natural with tools." "Well, if you ever want a lesson, I can show you the basics," Bryce offered. "Never know when you'll need to tinker with a pipe or fix a loose knob." "Deal," she answered, surprising herself with how comfortable she felt around him. She leaned against the wall, ignoring the chill of the concrete. So, how's the shop? My car's still running fine, by the way. You did a great job. He tightened a bolt, then looked up. Glad to hear it. The shop's steady. I've got my regular customers, and the occasional emergency repair. Keeps me busy enough. An awkward silence filled the space. Gracie sensed Bryce wanted to ask more, but he seemed to hold back out of respect. She almost wished he would press her for details, so she could test how ready she was to reveal anything. Instead, she spoke first. I'm grateful for what you did, she began, struggling to find the right words. I still don't want to burden you with my problems, but He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Gracie, you don't owe me explanations. I'm just glad you're safe and you found a place to land. His expression softened. We've all got our pasts. It's okay if yours needs a little time to unfold. Relief flooded her chest. She gave him a small nod, swallowing the emotion that threatened to rise. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, the morning sun filtered through the narrow basement window, catching the dust motes in the air. They stood quietly, sharing an understanding that felt both fragile and real. Gracie realized she was now well past the comfortable life she'd grown up with, fancy dinners, chauffeurs, the weight of her last name. Here, among creaky pipes and a flickering basement light, was a freedom she'd never dared to imagine. Even if the road ahead was shaky, she felt more alive with each uncertain step she took away from her old world. As the days passed, Gracie settled into a routine that was entirely foreign to her old life. She woke early to help Liz prepare a simple breakfast spread, muffins, fruit, freshly brewed coffee, then took her place at the reception desk, greeting travelers from all walks of life. Some were retirees on road trips, others were business people passing through. One or two recognized Bryce's name when they mentioned he'd fixed their cars, linking Gracie to him by association. She found it oddly comforting. During her breaks, she ventured into the local neighborhood, exploring small shops that lined the quieter streets of Raleigh. The city felt more welcoming by the day, yet there was always that thin layer of apprehension clinging to her. She avoided giving out her last name. She refrained from using credit cards that might tip off her father's people. Cash transactions, borrowed rides, and a watchful eye over her shoulder had become second nature. One cloudy afternoon, she was returning to the inn with a bag of groceries for Liz when she noticed a black sedan idling across the street. The moment she glanced at it, the car pulled away slowly, as if whoever was inside didn't want to be seen. Her pulse spiked. She told herself it was probably nothing, a coincidence. But the suspicion wouldn't leave her alone. Inside the inn, Samantha was wiping down the check-in counter. Gracie inhaled sharply, pushing aside her worry. I got the items Liz asked for, she announced, setting the grocery bag down. Where is she? Out running errands, Samantha replied, her southern accent gentle. She'll be back soon. Everything okay? You look a little spooked. Gracie shook her head, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just thought I saw a car following me. It was probably nothing. Samantha's gaze turned sympathetic. You've got that look about you, like you're running from something. Listen, I've been there, left a bad marriage a couple years back. People in this town helped me get on my feet. Liz is one of them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. If someone's making you feel unsafe, let us know. We're here, okay? Her candid offer made Gracie's throat tighten. She realized how much she was beginning to lean on this small community. Thank you, she murmured. I appreciate that. To distract herself, she threw her energy into the evening tasks, rearranging the lobby, organizing the linen closet, and updating a few reservations on the computer. The hum of normal activity soothed her nerves. By the time Liz returned, Gracie was too exhausted to dwell on suspicious cars. Late that evening, after most guests had turned in, Gracie curled up in the lounge area with a cup of tea. The inn's hallways were quiet except for a faint television sound seeping from a guest's room. She allowed herself a moment to soak in the peace, telling herself everything was fine. Just then, her phone vibrated. A new text. "Where are you?" She stared at the words, her chest constricting. There was no name, but she knew the tone, sharp, demanding, the kind that suggested whoever it was believed they had every right to demand answers. Her father's people, or maybe Mitchell, the fiancé she'd left behind. She briefly considered ignoring it, then turned the phone off entirely. She refused to be pulled back. Breathing shakily, she reminded herself she had a job, a safe place to stay, and the beginnings of true friendships. Whatever rules she'd lived by before, dutiful, obedient, dependent on her father's goodwill, no longer applied. In Raleigh, she was forging new rules for herself. And if certain shadows insisted on following her, she'd learn how to stand firm rather than run. That night, sleep came in fits, haunted by half-formed dreams of looming black cars and disapproving voices. Yet, when morning broke, she forced herself upright, prepared to face the day's tasks again. She had a room to tidy, guests to greet, and a local community fair to help Liz advertise. Step by step, she would prove that the old rules of her family's world had no hold on her anymore. Sunlight poured through the lobby windows as Gracie carried a tray of freshly laundered hand towels to the small kitchenette near reception. Liz had insisted the inn's touches remain personal: warm lighting, soft towels, fresh cookies in the afternoons, and Gracie was discovering a gentle satisfaction in each small act of care. It felt almost therapeutic to offer comfort after a lifetime of feeling trapped by her family's reputation. That morning, Samantha brought her a takeout cup of spiced chai from the cafe down the street. "Thought you might need this," she said, flashing an encouraging grin. "You've been working non-stop." Gracie accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the aroma of cinnamon and cardamom. "Thank you," she said, taking a sip. "I didn't realize how busy life in an inn could be." Samantha leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "Liz has a knack for drawing people in. She always says it's not about fancy facilities, it's about genuine hospitality. Guess that's why I stayed on all these years." Gracie found herself smiling. "I believe it. She's been like a guide to me already." Her voice softened. "Kind of a mother figure, if that makes sense." Samantha nodded. "She's that for many around here. Never had kids of her own, but she practically adopted half the neighborhood." Then, with a curious glint in her eye, she added, "What about Bryce? Have you gotten a chance to know him better?" Heat rose to Gracie's cheeks, and she busied herself adjusting the towels. "He's been friendly, helpful. I owe him a lot, but we haven't talked in depth." The slight tremor in her voice betrayed the feeling she couldn't quite articulate. Something about Bryce made her feel safe, yet also acutely aware of all she was hiding. A gentle rap on the front door interrupted them. It was an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Halloway, long-time locals who popped by now and then for Liz's advice on neighborhood happenings. They greeted Gracie warmly and asked if the inn still served tea in the afternoons. Samantha obliged, leading them to a cozy table in the lounge while Gracie prepared a small teapot. When the couple recognized Gracie as the young lady Bryce Jenkins helped that stormy night, she could only nod sheepishly. She realized word had spread through the tight-knit community. "Yes, he saved me from a pretty rough situation," she said, choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Halloway patted Gracie's hand. "That Bryce has a good heart, always has. He used to drop by our place on his day off back when he was a firefighter, just to check that our smoke alarms were working. My nephew once said Bryce was the bravest man on the team." Her heart squeezed at this picture of a man so dedicated to protecting others, especially those who needed it most. She wanted to know more, why he'd left that profession, what haunted him behind his gentle demeanor. Yet she held her questions back. Later that afternoon, Liz, returning from a supply run, found Gracie alone in the kitchenette. "You all right, dear? You look a bit lost in thought." Gracie shrugged lightly. "Just thinking about how people here care for each other. It's a new experience for me." Liz raised a brow. "Where you come from, folks weren't so neighborly." "Not exactly." Gracie paused, choosing honesty for once. It was more about appearances, connections. "Who you knew and how you looked doing it." Liz nodded knowingly. "That kind of life can be lonely. Glad you're seeing there's another way. Love and support can come from the simplest places, you know." At that moment, Gracie's phone buzzed in her pocket. She steeled herself, but checked it anyway. This time, no ominous text, just a marketing message from a random number. She let out the breath she'd been holding. The reprieve was temporary, she knew, but it felt like a gift to have a day where she could focus on forging genuine connections. Glancing out the window at the sunlit courtyard, Gracie sensed a shift within herself. Here, in this unassuming inn and among humble, caring people, she was finding anchors to hold on to. She only hoped that when her past did come knocking, she'd have the strength and the support to stand her ground. A week later, Liz decided to celebrate her 55th birthday with a small gathering in the inn's cozy dining room. She didn't want any fuss, just a casual potluck among friends. Naturally, Gracie and Samantha offered to handle most of the arrangements. They set up a long table with a simple white cloth, placed a few wildflower arrangements around, and made room for the handful of guests who would drop by. That evening, Bryce arrived with a homemade chocolate cake, eliciting a round of applause. "Didn't bake it myself," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "Marilyn at the cafe insisted on doing it, but I helped stir." The air filled with warmth and laughter. Besides Bryce and Samantha, a few local neighbors popped in, including an older gentleman who once served as Liz's handyman, and a retired teacher who'd been coming to the Oak and Maple Inn for Sunday brunch for years. Gracie watched them all exchange stories, inside jokes, and memories spanning decades. She marveled at the sense of belonging that radiated between them. When the group settled around the table, Liz took the head seat. Glasses of sweet tea, lemonade, and the occasional bottle of craft beer clinked together in a round of toasts. Samantha nudged Gracie gently. "You should say a few words," she whispered, her smile encouraging. Gracie's heart fluttered. She rose, feeling the heat rush to her cheeks, and cleared her throat. I haven't known Liz long, but she's already made a huge difference in my life. She and Samantha took me in when I didn't know where to turn, and I don't have enough words to thank them. So, happy birthday, Liz. You've given so many of us a home when we needed one." A wave of applause swept the table, and Liz wiped a tear from the corner of her eye before patting Gracie's hand. "Your family now, hun," she said softly. The cake was cut, plates passed around, and chatter filled the room once more. Gracie found herself next to Bryce, who was quietly savoring his slice of chocolate cake. He turned to her with a gentle expression. "Nice speech," she smiled. "Thanks." They fell into a comfortable conversation about everyday topics, how the inn was doing, the subtle quirks of Raleigh, and why the city's humidity could feel so oppressive. Gracie realized she felt more at ease with him than she ever had in her old life. Amid opulent parties or glittering fundraisers, here, in this low-key dinner, everything felt sincere. As the evening wound down, Samantha offered to pick up more napkins from the storage in the basement. Bryce excused himself to help carry a box of supplies upstairs. That left Gracie alone with a moment to breathe. She glanced around at the happy faces, seeing the kindness that linked them all. A spark of realization hit her. These people were her allies. They cared about each other without ulterior motives. It wasn't something she was used to, but it was everything she'd been craving. Her phone buzzed again, making her tense. She stepped away to check it discreetly. Another unknown caller. Her stomach sank, a reminder that her father's influence might still be lurking. She declined the call, determined not to let fear overshadow the evening. Liz's voice rang out from the head of the table. "Gracie, dear, could you help me with some leftover containers for the guests?" Grateful for the interruption, Gracie pocketed her phone and joined Liz in the kitchen. Together, they stacked plastic boxes with slices of cake and portions of homemade casserole. The older guests said their goodbyes, expressing delight at the warm celebration. Bryce reappeared with Samantha in tow, both carrying small boxes of decorations to be stored away. When the last guests left, a hush settled over the dining room. Liz thanked everyone for making her birthday special. Bryce placed a reassuring hand on Gracie's shoulder before heading out. "Take care," he said quietly, eyes reflecting understanding. Somehow, he'd sensed the tension she carried despite the festive air. Gracie let out a shaky breath. The call she'd ignored still echoed in her mind, but tonight's gathering reminded her she didn't have to face these shadows alone. Allies were forming around her, friends who might stand by her side if trouble came knocking. She only hoped she'd be brave enough to let them. Close to midnight, the Oak and Maple Inn had settled back into tranquility after Liz's birthday celebration. Gracie was wiping down the dining room table, humming softly to herself. Dishes were done, leftovers boxed up, guests tucked in their rooms. It felt peaceful, almost deceptively so. Suddenly, her phone chimed on the counter. She froze, glancing at it. The screen displayed a text from a number she recognized but had never saved. "I'm in Raleigh. Stop running." Her heart thudded. This could only mean one thing. Her father or someone representing him was very close. Anxiety roared back, threatening to undo the progress she'd made. A soft footstep alerted her that she wasn't alone. She looked up to see Samantha at the doorway, still in her party attire, a simple floral dress, watching with concern. "Everything okay?" Samantha asked quietly. Gracie debated lying, but the lump in her throat forced honesty. "I think my father's in town," she whispered. "He doesn't approve of me being here. He'll do anything to make me return." Samantha's eyes narrowed in protective anger. "He'd got no right to force you back if you don't want to go." A fresh wave of fear and frustration swelled. "He's powerful. Money. Connections. I don't know how far he'll go." She realized she was trembling and pressed her hands to her temples, trying to steady herself. Without hesitation, Samantha crossed the room and placed a calming hand on Gracie's shoulder. "Then we face it head on. You got friends here, remember?" Before Gracie could respond, the front door of the inn rattled. She jolted, but it was only Bryce peering through the glass. Samantha hurried over to let him in. He stepped inside, eyebrows knitted with worry. "Sorry to come back so late. I realized I left my wallet here earlier. Everything all right?" Gracie swallowed hard, slipping her phone into her pocket as if hiding it could erase her fear. "We're fine," she managed, but her tense posture betrayed her words. Bryce's gaze flicked between Samantha and Gracie. "Did something happen?" Samantha shot a questioning look at Gracie, who hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. At last, she sighed. "I got a message. My father's in Raleigh. I'm worried he might try to force me back." Bryce's eyes darkened with concern. "Is this the same father who arranged that marriage you mentioned before?" She'd hinted once about being pushed into a relationship, though she hadn't given many details. She nodded, arms crossed over her chest. "He won't listen to reason. My name, my background. He thinks it all belongs to him." Bryce approached gently, his presence steady, reminding her of that stormy night when he'd intervened to help. "Gracie," he began softly, "you're not alone here. No one can drag you anywhere if you don't want to go." Anger flashed in his eyes. "I can make sure of that." Emotions welled up, gratitude mixing with fear. "Thank you, but he can be very persuasive." She thought about the small army of lawyers, security personnel, and associates that her father employed. This was no idle threat. Samantha exhaled. "We can talk to Liz in the morning, see what she suggests. Maybe get some legal advice if it comes to that." Gracie nodded, tears pricking her eyes. She couldn't believe how these people, relatively strangers just weeks ago, were rallying around her. Overwhelmed, she sank into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. "I just want to be free," she murmured. Bryce knelt beside her, resting a gentle hand on her arm. "You deserve that, and we'll help you keep it," he said, voice firm. After a moment of collective silence, he stood. "Let me get my wallet and let you both rest," he said quietly. Samantha pointed to where it lay by the kitchenette. As he picked it up, he turned back to Gracie. "If anything happens tonight, any strange noises or someone showing up, call me no matter the hour." She nodded, too choked up to speak. Samantha walked him to the door, and when he left, an unsettling hush settled over the inn. The shadows on the walls seemed darker somehow, and Gracie's pulse throbbed with the knowledge that her father was in the same city. Tomorrow, she'd have to figure out a plan. Tonight, she could only cling to the promise of friendship and the hope that she wouldn't have to face those shadows alone. Gracie awoke to an early morning hush at the Oak and Maple Inn, the sun barely cresting the horizon. She'd hardly slept, haunted by that last text and the knowledge that her father, Thomas Montgomery, was somewhere in Raleigh. Slipping into her work polo, she tried to quell the unease twisting in her stomach. There was no sense in lying around waiting for her fears to materialize. Down in the lobby, Samantha was already setting out a tray of pastries. She offered Gracie a sympathetic nod. "Rough night?" she asked gently. Gracie managed a small shrug. "Yeah. Hard to sleep when I know he could show up any time." Samantha patted her on the arm. "We're all here for you, remember that." By mid-morning, business picked up. Guests checked out, new ones arrived, and the phone rang steadily with inquiries. The bustle provided a welcome distraction from the tension gnawing at Gracie, yet the relief was short-lived. Around noon, she noticed a tall, impeccably dressed man standing near the front desk, scrutinizing her. Her pulse jolted when he cleared his throat and asked for Miss Gracie. She forced a polite smile. "Yes." The man offered a clipped nod. "I'm employed by Mr. Thomas Montgomery. He requests your presence at the Raleigh Grand Hotel, Suite 802, to discuss family matters." His expression remained neutral, but the tone carried a threat. Refusal was not an option. Samantha, hovering a few feet away, subtly moved closer. Gracie's throat went dry. She fought to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I'm not. My instructions are to ensure you understand the gravity of this situation," he interrupted. "If you do not comply, Mr. Montgomery will pursue legal avenues." At that, Samantha stepped in. "She doesn't owe you or your boss any explanation." The man's gaze flicked dismissively toward Samantha, then returned to Gracie. "You have until tomorrow evening to contact Mr. Montgomery, or he will take further measures." Without waiting for a response, he pivoted and strode out, leaving the inn's door swinging behind him. Gracie's hands shook. Samantha placed an arm around her shoulders. "Ignore that pompous suit. We'll figure something out." But tears pricked Gracie's eyes. Her father had never been known for his patience. Threats of legal action, perhaps even attempts to claim she was mentally unfit, were well within his arsenal. She recalled how he had once strong-armed a distant relative into signing away property rights, all with a simple show of connections and money. Not long after, Bryce arrived to check on the inn's AC unit. His eyes narrowed with concern the moment he saw Gracie's ashen face. In a quiet corner of the lobby, he asked, "What happened?" She explained the messenger's visit, her voice trembling. Bryce's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "You shouldn't have to deal with intimidation. You want me to talk to him." "No," she said quickly. "I can't drag you into this." But inside, she was torn between relief at his protectiveness and guilt over the danger she might be bringing his way. That evening, once the inn quieted, Gracie retreated to her room. She stared at her phone, Thomas's messages piling up unanswered. She considered calling him directly. Maybe she could reason with him. But every memory told her otherwise. Thomas Montgomery wasn't one to concede. A marriage arrangement, her role in the family business, everything was decided on his terms. A soft knock on her door startled her. Liz stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs of herbal tea. "Thought you could use this," she said, offering one to Gracie. "Samantha filled me in. Listen, I've seen bullies like that before. They rely on fear." Gracie sipped the tea, her eyes glistening. "He's my father," she whispered, "and he's always gotten his way." Liz's expression was kind but firm. "Then it's time someone told him no." She set a comforting hand on Gracie's knee. "Bryce, Samantha, me, we're all in this with you. Don't give up your life just because he's pushing." Gracie nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. In that moment, she felt a flicker of determination rise through the dread. She couldn't let Thomas's threats strip away the freedom she'd fought to claim. The season of trials had begun, and she wasn't backing down, not when she had people here who believed in her. Early the next day, Gracie braced herself for another round of calls and messages from her father. Sure enough, by breakfast, 2 missed calls and another text lit up her screen. Each note demanded a meeting. Each hammered home how much Thomas believed her duty was to the family, not to herself. She remained at the front desk, checking in a pair of weary travelers who'd arrived before dawn. The guests barely noticed the strain in her voice, but Bryce did when he walked in to deliver a small box of fresh pastries from Marilyn's cafe. He set the box down and asked in a low tone, "You all right?" Gracie forced a wry smile. Define all right. She rubbed her temples. "I keep thinking maybe I should just go and talk to him, but I'm terrified that if I do, I'll cave under the pressure." Bryce nodded. "I won't lie, I'm out of my depth here, but maybe confrontation is the only way to show him you're serious." She sighed, remembering how Thomas had shaped her since childhood. Elegance, obedience, the perfect smile, those were the hallmarks of a Montgomery heiress. "You don't get it," she said quietly. "I was raised to honor my father. He's always said the Montgomery name is bigger than individual desires. Part of me still feels guilty, like I'm betraying everything he taught me." Bryce's gaze softened. "My dad left when I was a kid," he offered. "I grew up with a single mom who taught me about sacrifice. But I learned something else. It's not dishonorable to want your own life." Before Gracie could respond, Samantha peeked in. "We've got a situation." She jerked her thumb over her shoulder. "A man's outside. Looks like he might be Mitchell, the fiancé your father set you up with. Liz recognized him from some news article about a business deal." Gracie's stomach plummeted. Mitchell Hammond was only a name in her nightmares these days, a slick businessman nearly 10 years her senior who saw her more as an asset than a person. She'd never wanted to speak to him again. Her mind raced, fighting the urge to run. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to stand taller. "Okay," she said, "I'll handle it." Surprising even herself, she moved toward the front door, ignoring the flutter of panic in her chest. Outside, Mitchell leaned against a sleek black SUV, dressed in a tailored suit. His dark hair was slicked back, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. When he spotted her, he spread his arms in mock delight. "Gracie!" "So this is where you've been hiding?" She crossed her arms protectively. "I'm not hiding. I'm living my life." His gaze flicked over her polo shirt and name tag, as though baffled by the idea she might choose a modest job over luxurious parties. "Running a little roadside inn, I see," he sneered. "Thomas told me you had wild notions about independence, but I never thought you'd stoop to this." Gracie clenched her jaw. "There's nothing low about honest work," she countered. "Why are you here?" He brushed an invisible speck off his sleeve. "Your father insists you return. I've come to help facilitate reconciliation. There's still time for you to do the right thing, for the family." She fought back tears of anger and shame. "The right thing," she echoed. "How about respecting my choice not to marry someone I don't love?" Mitchell's smirk hardened. "We had an arrangement. Think of the business alliances at stake. Walking away has consequences, Gracie." She felt Bryce step up behind her. He didn't speak, but the warmth of his presence fortified her. She lifted her chin. "I don't care about your deals, Mitchell. Tell my father I'm not coming back." The man's eyes narrowed. "So be it." He slid into the SUV, tossing a final glare at Bryce. "This place can't shield you forever." As Mitchell drove off, Gracie exhaled shakily, relief and dread mingling in her gut. The confrontation was brief, but it left her rattled. She turned to Bryce, her eyes brimming with unspoken turmoil. He set a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he murmured. But inside, Gracie felt the storm still raging, a paradox of honor and rebellion colliding within her. She couldn't shake the sense that this battle was just beginning. The afternoon following Mitchell's departure brought a tense lull over the inn. Gracie tried to focus on mundane tasks, answering phone calls, preparing room keys, but her mind kept replaying that smug look on Mitchell's face. Whenever she ventured near the lobby windows, she half expected to see his SUV lurking outside. Liz, noticing Gracie's tension, decided they all needed a morale boost. "Let's do an impromptu barbecue," she suggested, beckoning Samantha and Bryce. "Invite a few neighbors, grill some hot dogs in the backyard. We can use a little normalcy around here." They gathered behind the inn, where a modest patio offered enough space for a small charcoal grill and a few folding chairs. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the scene. Samantha arranged bowls of salad and chips on a makeshift table. Bryce manned the grill with practiced ease, flipping burgers and brats. Several friendly neighbors from the block wandered over, drawn by the smoky aroma and the lure of good company. Gracie found herself laughing at small jokes, sipping a glass of iced tea. For a moment, it almost felt like a typical summer gathering, until her gaze strayed to the fence, and she remembered the threat that loomed. She tried to shake off the dread. Later, as twilight settled, Bryce pulled her aside. "Hey, thought you might want some fresh air." They walked down a short path lined with flowering shrubs, the muffled sounds of chatter trailing behind them. When they reached a quiet corner, Gracie spoke, voice hushed. "I keep waiting for another shoe to drop. Mitchell's a smooth talker, but my father, he's relentless." Bryce leaned against the fence. "I wish I could do more to shield you from this," she smiled sadly. "You've done plenty already, but my father's influence is like a wall I can't climb. Legally, financially, he always has the upper hand." He considered that. "What if you talk to a lawyer? Liz mentioned she knows someone who could advise you. This is still your life, your decision." Gracie's mind flashed to the memory of her father's team of top-tier attorneys. They'd shredded competitors in court with ease, yet she nodded. I'd like that, if only to know where I stand. Suddenly, a distant crunch of gravel alerted them to a sleek car pulling into the alley behind the inn. Bryce stiffened. Gracie felt her throat tighten as she recognized the license plate format, likely from out of state, possibly one of her father's. The car halted, headlights glaring. Then the engine revved, reversing back out of sight. Gracie's knees felt weak. "They're watching me," she whispered, eyes locked on the empty space where the car had been. "It's like I can't breathe without them taking note." Bryce gently placed a hand at her elbow, guiding her closer. "We'll figure out a way around that wall," he promised, voice low. "You're not alone anymore." She blinked back tears. Every time she thought she might be free, another reminder of her father's power surfaced. "He's going to keep pushing," she said shakily. "And Mitchell, I've never seen him look so confident. He's sure I'll cave." Bryce's gaze turned resolute. "Let them try. You have a whole community on your side now. Me, Liz, Samantha, everyone you've met here. This might sound cheesy, but we protect our own." Touched, Gracie allowed herself to rest her head briefly against Bryce's shoulder. In the twilight, the faint chirp of crickets underscored how surreal her life had become. She had once lived in a gilded cage, every comfort provided, every step controlled. Now, she stood on the edge of a new life, threatened by the same people who once claimed to love her. When they returned to the barbecue, Liz and Samantha cast worried glances at them. But the group pretended everything was fine, focusing on the last bits of grilled food and the cheerful hum of conversation. Gracie forced a smile, wishing she could share in the carefree mood. Yet her thoughts circled back to that intangible wall her father represented. She might have found a new home here, but she knew Thomas Montgomery's determination well. This was no simple disagreement. It was a battle of wills. And the question lingered. How long could she hold out against him? 2 days later, Gracie's anxiety peaked when a neatly dressed courier arrived at the inn around noon, delivering a formal envelope addressed to Gracie Montgomery. The receptionist area fell silent as Samantha placed the envelope in Gracie's trembling hands. A sense of doom rippled through her. She slipped into the lounge, heart hammering, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Thomas Montgomery's legal counsel. In polite but firm language, it detailed that Gracie was expected to return home for familial negotiations or face legal proceedings over her mental competency. The text implied she was making irrational decisions that harmed the family's interests, hinting they could challenge her ability to manage her own affairs. Tears blurred her vision. She heard footsteps and felt Liz gently take the letter, scanning it. "They're really going this far," Liz muttered, anger threading her voice, "trying to paint you as incompetent." Gracie pressed her lips together. "It's the same tactic he used on an elderly aunt years ago," she managed. "He wanted her property, and when she refused, he claimed she was mentally unfit. She gave in to avoid the ordeal." Before Liz could respond, Samantha appeared, concern etched across her face. "Bryce is here," she whispered. "He saw the courier. Wants to know if you're all right." Gracie nodded numbly, allowing them to guide her to a small office behind the reception. Bryce stood waiting, arms crossed, tension visible in his posture. "Tell me," he said quietly. Liz handed him the letter. As he read, his jaw set in anger. "You're not incompetent," he said firmly to Gracie. "This is pure bullying." She sniffled, wiping away tears. "I know, but he has money. Lawyers. If this goes to court," Liz placed a calming hand on Gracie's shoulder, "we'll talk to Richard, a local attorney friend I know. He's helped people before in complicated situations." Later that afternoon, Liz made the call, and Richard, an experienced lawyer in his 50s, agreed to meet them at the inn. That evening, he arrived with a leather briefcase, wearing a kind but no-nonsense expression. They gathered in the lounge, Gracie, Bryce, Samantha, and Liz, all on the edge of their seats. Richard adjusted his glasses, carefully reviewing the letter. "I've seen intimidation attempts like this," he began, voice calm. "Legally, for them to prove mental incompetence, they'd need extensive documentation and medical evaluations. It's not easy, unless you sign something or inadvertently give them ammunition. The question is whether you want to engage on their terms or push back." Gracie's stomach churned. "How do I push back?" He clasped his hands. "For starters, I can file a preemptive notice that you're represented by counsel, making it clear you have no intention of returning under duress. We can also compile evidence of your stable life here, employment, a residence, community ties. Those factors undermine their claim." She felt a spark of hope. "You really think that will work?" Richard nodded slowly. "Thomas Montgomery is banking on you capitulating. Showing him you're prepared to fight might be enough to force a better negotiation, maybe even get him to back off." Bryce spoke up, voice steady. "And if he doesn't back off?" Richard's face grew serious. "Then we prepare for a legal battle." He turned to Gracie. "But it's your decision. Do you want to avoid confrontation or stand your ground?" She glanced around at the small circle of supporters, Liz's protective stance, Samantha's resolute nod, Bryce's unwavering gaze. She'd never felt so both vulnerable and empowered at once. "I want to stand my ground," she said softly. "I'm done running." Richard gave a curt nod. "I'll draft the necessary paperwork in the morning." As he packed up his briefcase and left, Gracie sank into a chair, overwhelmed yet determined. Liz approached with 2 mugs of warm cocoa, handing one to her. "See, dear, you're not alone." Gracie stared into the steaming mug. "No, I'm not," she whispered, gratitude mingling with fear of what might come next. This was only a temporary stay of action, a formal notice that she wouldn't be bullied into submission. But the deeper battle, facing her father himself, still loomed. At least now she had a shield of friendship and the beginnings of legal protection to hold him at bay. The following morning dawned crisp and bright, a welcome contrast to the swirl of emotions churning inside Gracie. She stepped out onto the Oak and Maple Inn's front porch, inhaling the fresh air. A new day meant a new chance to reaffirm her decision to live life on her terms. Richard stopped by briefly to deliver the official paperwork he'd prepared. He explained how it would be sent to Thomas Montgomery's legal team, stating unequivocally that Gracie was competent and refusing further familial interference. "This puts the ball in their court," Richard noted. "They can respond or back off." Liz, standing beside Gracie on the porch, watched him leave. "Any idea what your father's reaction will be?" she asked gently. Gracie shook her head. "He's unpredictable. Sometimes he backs down to avoid bad publicity, but other times he doubles down." Her voice wavered. "But I have to believe I'm strong enough now." They headed inside, where Samantha had just finished brewing a fresh pot of coffee. "I say we celebrate this small victory," she declared, handing Gracie a steaming mug. "You took a stand, girl." A tentative smile touched Gracie's lips as she sipped the coffee. Her mind drifted to Bryce, who was out on a service call for his auto shop. He'd texted earlier, encouraging her to keep faith in herself. The memory of his calm, reassuring presence steadied her nerves. By mid-afternoon, Gracie took a short walk around the block. The familiar sights of Raleigh, quaint houses, tree-lined streets, and friendly neighbors offered comfort. A few folks recognized her from the inn, waving or greeting her by name. Each wave reminded her that she belonged here now, at least for this season of her life. She stopped by a small bookstore, lured by the warm interior. Rows of paperbacks and novels beckoned, and she wandered until she found herself in front of a display about personal growth and self-discovery. Picking up one of the volumes, she ran her fingers across the cover. If someone had told her a few months ago that she'd be browsing self-help books while effectively at war with her father, she would have laughed. Yet here she was, forging a path she never knew existed. A subtle chill prickled at the back of her neck. Glancing toward the entrance, she thought she saw a man in a dark coat stepping away, as though avoiding her gaze. Her pulse leapt. Were they following her again? She couldn't be certain. Maybe it was just another shopper. But unease gnawed at her, prompting her to leave the bookstore sooner than planned. Back at the inn, Samantha caught her slipping inside, still pale. "You all right?" she asked, concern lacing her tone. "Thought I saw someone tailing me," Gracie admitted, setting the bookstore bag on the reception desk. "Could have been nothing, but I can't shake this feeling." Samantha gave her a reassuring hug. "We'll keep watch, but remember, you have a lawyer now. If they pull anything, we'll fight." Gracie exhaled, nodding gratefully. She headed up to her room, where she flipped through the book she'd bought. Its opening chapter spoke about finding the courage to speak one's truth, despite fear of judgment. The words resonated like a clarion call. A few hours later, Bryce returned and caught Gracie in the lobby. "Heard you got the paperwork sent," he said, his hand resting gently at her elbow. She nodded. "It's a start." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Her eyes misted. "I couldn't have done it alone. You and everyone here, you gave me the courage." He squeezed her hand briefly, then let go. "Any time. So, what's next?" A ripple of determination passed through Gracie. "I need to be fully honest with you about my background, my father, everything. You deserve to know who you're helping." Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself. "I don't want this secret to hang over us anymore." Bryce's expression softened, and he nodded. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." She realized that confronting her father wasn't the only hurdle. She had to trust others with her truth. Taking a steadying breath, Gracie resolved that soon she would tell Bryce every last detail. Because if she was truly free, truly done running, it meant opening her heart to the man who'd rescued her that fateful rainy night. And this time, she'd rescue herself too, by letting him in. The afternoon sky hung low and grey over the Oak and Maple Inn as Gracie prepared to finally reveal everything to Bryce. She had asked him to meet her in one of the inn's side parlours, a small, rarely used sitting room with lace curtains and an old grandfather clock ticking softly in the corner. Her heart thudded against her ribs, a jumble of fear and determination. If she wanted any chance at a genuine future, she couldn't keep hiding her identity, especially now that her father's threats loomed larger than ever. When Bryce entered, he wore a slightly puzzled expression, his sandy blonde hair ruffled from the wind outside. "Gracie," he greeted gently, "you sounded urgent." She nodded, moistening her lips. I need to tell you who I really am. My full name is Gracie Montgomery, and my father is Thomas Montgomery." She paused to let the words sink in. "He's one of the wealthiest men in the region. I ran away to escape a forced engagement he arranged with Mitchell Hammond. The pressure was suffocating, and I just left." A flicker of hurt and confusion rippled across Bryce's face. "So that's why your father's been threatening legal action. Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes brimmed with remorse. "I was scared that you'd see me as some spoiled heiress playing at being normal. Or worse, that if you knew, you'd feel obligated to help me or reject me altogether. And I wanted to be seen as just Gracie." He exhaled a slow breath. "All those times I asked if you needed help, you were carrying this alone. I'm not angry that you come from money. I'm hurt that you didn't trust me enough to say so." His voice held no malice, but the raw disappointment was clear. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Samantha's voice, laced with alarm, echoed through the parlor door. "Sir, you can't just barge in." The door slammed open. There stood Thomas Montgomery, tall and silver-haired at 68, his stance rigid with authority. Beside him stood Mitchell Hammond, face set in a tight sneer. Liz and Samantha hovered in the corridor, looking ready to intervene. Gracie's blood froze. She had expected her father to push back hard, but not to show up unannounced inside the inn. Thomas surveyed the modest parlor with a flick of disdain before his gaze landed squarely on Bryce. "So this is the man who believes he can protect my daughter," he said coldly. Bryce rose, shoulders squared. "I don't believe anything," he replied calmly. "I just do what's right." A tense silence enveloped the room. Thomas advanced a step, ignoring Gracie's attempts to speak. "Gracie," he said, voice low and controlled. "Pack your things. You're coming back with me today. We'll fix this mess quietly. Your employment at this little inn ends now." Gracie's stomach lurched. Summoning courage, she lifted her chin. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." A muscle in Thomas's jaw twitched. "I've had enough of your defiance. You've caused enough disgrace to this family. Let's not forget the financial ramifications if you refuse the marriage." Bryce cut in. "She said no. Back off." Thomas's glare sharpened. "And who are you? An ex-firefighter with a small repair shop?" "Believe me, son, you're out of your depth." Mitchell stepped forward, voice smooth as silk. "Gracie, be reasonable. We've all bent over backward to give you time to come to your senses. Let's leave this place and settle matters like adults." She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm done being treated like a pawn, and I don't love you, Mitchell. I never did." Thomas's face darkened with fury. "Gracie, if you don't cooperate, I'll ruin this man's business. I'll pull every string I have in Raleigh. You think I can't crush a small auto shop in a day?" Bryce's stance wavered. The threat was real. Gracie saw the anguish in his eyes. He hadn't asked for any of this. She felt torn in two, guilt flooding her system. Unable to bear the tension, Bryce finally took a step back, anger and betrayal flickering across his features. "Gracie, I need a moment," he said hoarsely, turning and walking out of the parlor. She started to follow, but Thomas blocked her path. Liz and Samantha exchanged looks of shock, unsure whether to intervene. In that heartbeat of silence, Gracie realized her worst fear was coming true. By hiding her identity, she had lost Bryce's trust at the very moment she needed him most. And now, facing her domineering father and the calculating Mitchell, she felt more exposed than ever. Thomas Montgomery's unannounced arrival cast a deep pall over the Oak and Maple Inn. After the confrontation, he and Mitchell left, warning Gracie they'd return in 2 days for a final decision. The threats still echoed in her ears, but Bryce's abrupt exit weighed on her heart even more. Sometime later, in the hush of the inn's main hallway, Liz guided Gracie to a small office where they could talk privately. Gracie slumped into a wooden chair, her mind swirling with regret. "I never meant for Bryce to be threatened," she murmured, eyes red. "I should have told him everything from the start." Liz rubbed Gracie's shoulder gently. "What's done is done, dear. Sometimes we make choices out of fear. The important thing is what we do next." A sudden resolve sparked within Gracie. She looked at Liz, voice trembling but firm. "My father won't relent. He's staying at the Raleigh Grand Hotel and expects me to show up, tail between my legs. Maybe I need to confront him in his own domain." Liz pressed her lips together in thought. "You could, but you'll be walking into the lion's den. If you do, at least let Samantha or me go with you, or both of us." Gracie nodded. "I appreciate that." She paused, the memory of Bryce's pained expression flashing in her mind. But first, I have to see Bryce. Talk to him if he'll let me. Liz's gentle smile offered a glimmer of hope. You should. You two have been circling each other with genuine feelings. If you want my opinion, don't let misunderstandings tear that down. That evening, Gracie found herself standing outside Bryce's small house, an older single-story bungalow on the quieter edge of Raleigh. She noticed the glow of a lamp inside through a front window. Summoning her courage, she knocked softly on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened a crack, Bryce's wary eyes peering out. He seemed tired, shadows beneath his usually bright gaze. "Hey," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I figured you'd come by." The living room was modest, with worn couches and a small bookshelf packed with old firehouse memorabilia, helmets, plaques, and photos from his firefighting days. She recognized the man in the pictures, a proud hero smiling with his team. Even in the dim lamplight, she could sense the heavy memory of that past life. "I'm sorry," Gracie began, her voice quaking. "I never wanted you to be in danger. I never wanted to lie about who I am." Bryce sank onto the couch, arms resting on his knees. "I'm not mad that you come from wealth or that you ran away. It's the secrecy, Gracie. You've been living in fear, sure, but I was ready to stand by you. I just wish you'd trusted me sooner." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I was afraid you'd see me as some bored heiress trying to play the victim, or that once my father found out you were helping me, he'd destroy your shop. And now—" He exhaled. "He's already threatening that. I can't pretend it doesn't matter. I've poured my whole life into that place. But I'm not going to let him bully me, or you, into surrender." A swell of relief fought its way through her guilt. "So, can we face him together?" she asked softly. "I plan to meet him at the Raleigh Grand tomorrow, and I don't want to do it alone." Bryce hesitated, glancing at an old photo of him in full gear, the memory of a rescue mission etched into his eyes. "I'll go," he finally said, "but promise me one thing. From here on out, no more half-truths. If we're going to stand against your father, let's do it with honesty." She nodded fervently, stepping closer and tentatively resting a hand on his shoulder. "I promise." They lingered in a fragile silence, the warmth of his presence reminding her that trust could be rebuilt if they worked at it. A faint sense of hope glimmered in the corners of her heart, even as the spectre of Thomas Montgomery loomed. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, a chance to answer the echo of choices she'd made when she first fled her gilded cage. This time, she wouldn't face it alone. The next morning, Raleigh was awash in golden light, the sun reflecting off windows and warming the sidewalks. Gracie, Bryce, and Liz stood in front of the opulent Raleigh Grand Hotel, its entrance flanked by marble columns and uniformed doormen. Despite her racing heart, Gracie walked through the gilded doors, determined to keep her head high. Thomas had reserved a private conference room on one of the upper floors, a pristine space with a long table, plush chairs, and a panoramic view of the city. Mitchell was already there, arms crossed, looking smug as ever. Thomas stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, gaze cool as he watched them enter. Liz, calm but resolute, took a seat at one end of the table. Bryce positioned himself near Gracie, shoulders set in quiet defiance. Gracie glanced at her father, steeling herself. "You wanted me here. Let's talk." Thomas's lips pressed into a thin line. "I want an end to this disgraceful rebellion. You leave your silly job at that inn, you end this fling with a mechanic, and you return to the Montgomery estate where you belong. We salvage the arranged marriage, or at least renegotiate with Mitchell. That's the only way this fiasco won't blow up further." Gracie inhaled deeply. "No, Father, I'm not returning, and I'm certainly not marrying Mitchell." The older man's eyes narrowed. "Stop this nonsense. Don't you understand the position you put me in? The board of the family's enterprises is asking questions. Our social circle is rife with rumors, and you think you can waltz off, ignoring the legacy you were born into." His fury underpinned every word. Before Gracie could respond, Bryce stepped forward, voice steady. "With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery, you can't force her to do anything. She has a right to choose her own life." Thomas regarded Bryce with thinly veiled contempt. "I warned you once. Don't presume to tell me how to handle my daughter. I can and will ruin your business if this continues." A flicker of fear crossed Bryce's face, but he didn't waver. "Do what you must." "I'm not abandoning Gracie." Thomas's anger deepened. He turned to Mitchell. "You wanted a last shot at persuading her, so speak now." Mitchell squared his shoulders. "Gracie, be rational. The alliance between our families was set for a reason. Investments, growth, an expansion that would benefit both sides. You know this better than anyone. And if you think you can lead a quiet, insignificant life in some backwater garage, you're mistaken. Eventually, you'll regret throwing it all away." She took a shaky breath, head spinning with memories of countless lavish dinners and forced smiles. "I'd rather live a simple life with genuine care than be part of a loveless marriage and empty social gestures." She glanced at Bryce, feeling steadier. "You can say I'm naive, but I'm done being a bargaining chip." Liz shifted, clearing her throat. "Mr. Montgomery, Gracie has counsel now. The intimidation tactics won't work. If you try to declare her incompetent or sabotage Bryce's business, we'll fight back." Thomas's cold gaze flicked to Liz. "And you are?" "Liz Patterson," she said coolly, "owner of the Oak and Maple Inn. A friend who believes Gracie deserves to make her own decisions." Thomas shook his head in disbelief, stepping closer to Gracie. "You would discard your birthright, the Montgomery fortune, for this. You'd humiliate your entire family name." Gracie felt a surge of pain, but also a new strength in her core. She met her father's eyes. "It's not about discarding anything. It's about owning my life. If that means I walk away from every penny, I will." She saw something flicker in Thomas's expression. Shock, perhaps disbelief. For a moment, his authority wavered. Mitchell let out a disgusted huff and moved away from the table, arms tight across his chest. At last, Thomas found his voice again. "If that's your final word," he said, each syllable measured, "then don't expect my help when this fiasco burns around you." Gracie's heart hammered, tears threatening, but she didn't break eye contact. "I accept that." In the charged silence, she felt a profound shift within herself. She wasn't the frightened runaway anymore. She was a woman who had chosen freedom over a gilded cage, love over obligation. And in that moment, a part of her was reborn. In the days after the dramatic confrontation at the Rally Grand, life at the Oak and Maple Inn settled back into its steady rhythm. Guests came and went, the phone rang with new reservations, and the smell of fresh coffee wafted through the lobby each morning. Gracie tried to focus on the mundane tasks, clinging to their familiar comfort as she processed the seismic shift in her relationship with her father. Bryce, meanwhile, returned to his shop with a wary eye on any sign of sabotage. To his surprise, there were no immediate repercussions, no sudden cancellations of supply contracts, no lawsuits or city inspectors showing up at his door. It seemed Thomas was biding his time. Gracie suspected he wasn't done, but for now, they had a reprieve. One afternoon, Bryce picked Gracie up from the inn, suggesting they drive to a nearby park for fresh air. The place was simple and open, a stretch of green with tall oak trees that rustled in a gentle breeze. They walked a winding path that looped around a small pond, neither speaking for a while. Gracie inhaled the scent of grass and pond water, letting the quiet calm her nerves. Finally, she broke the silence. "I keep waiting for another bomb to drop. My father letting me go so easily doesn't feel real." Bryce took her hand lightly, his fingers lacing with hers. He might be planning his next move, but you have people who'll stand with you. Liz, Samantha, me. We're not letting him isolate you. They came to a wooden bench by the water. Gracie settled there, smoothing her hands over her jeans. I used to think I needed my father's approval to be worthy, she said quietly. All those years, I did whatever he asked, learning the right manners, attending the right functions, just to hear him say, well done. But it was never enough. Bryce's eyes glimmered with sympathy. So, how do you feel now? Gracie let out a heavy breath, relieved and terrified, free but guilty for hurting him. She glanced up at the canopy of leaves overhead. And there's you. I dragged you into this mess. Part of me worries you're better off without my baggage. He squeezed her hand. I won't pretend it's easy, but I'd rather stand by you than watch you face this alone. That's what partnership is, right? A warm flush of gratitude coursed through her. Bryce's steady presence felt like the strongest bridge in her life right now. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small envelope. I got a note from my father's personal assistant, asking for a more civil meeting. He wants me to come to the mansion, alone. Bryce's brow creased. That's risky. You going? She hesitated. I'm thinking about it. Maybe it's a chance to lay out my terms once and for all, or maybe he's just trying to corner me again. But Liz suggested I set the rules. We meet on my turf, not his. Bryce nodded. Would he agree to come here? To the inn? Again? Gracie shrugged. Probably not. He hates how modest it is. But if he truly wants to talk, he might not have a choice. I need him to understand I'm done bending to his demands. They rose from the bench, continuing their stroll. Overhead, the sky remained clear, as if granting them a peaceful respite from the storm of conflict. Gracie felt lighter than she had in days, aware that she was forging a new path. She wasn't the same timid woman who'd shown up at Bryce's shop with a busted tire and a head full of secrets. Later, back at the inn, Liz and Samantha welcomed them with easy smiles, sensing the slight shift in Gracie's mood. That evening, she and Bryce joined them for a casual meal on the inn's patio, a simple but heartfelt gathering that reminded Gracie how real connections thrived in modest, genuine spaces. As they laughed over a minor mishap with the barbecue, the tension of the past weeks felt a shade less oppressive. Yet amid the warmth, Gracie remained conscious of the steps still ahead, fully rebuilding bridges not just with Bryce, but also, if possible, extending an olive branch to her father. Whether Thomas would accept it or light it on fire was anyone's guess. A week later, Raleigh buzzed with anticipation for the annual Firefighters charity event, a gathering that honored the local fire department's past heroes and raised funds for community safety initiatives. Held in a modest auditorium downtown, the event drew citizens from across the city, including volunteers, family members, and retired firefighters. Bryce had received a formal invitation from his old crew, though he'd hesitated to attend in previous years. This time, however, he decided to go. Gracie stood by his side near the entrance, scanning the crowd. Rows of folding chairs were laid out in front of a small stage where a banner read, "Thank you, Raleigh's bravest." She noticed a few people glance their way, whispers spreading as they recognized Bryce, the ex-firefighter who now ran a humble auto shop. Samantha and Liz arrived soon after, giving Gracie quick hugs and excited smiles. "This is a big night," Samantha whispered. "Time for Bryce to see how appreciated he still is." They found seats near the front. Speakers took turns on stage, the current chief praising the department's achievements, a veteran recounting stories of daring rescues. The mood was warm, and applause punctuated every speech. Gracie watched Bryce carefully. She could sense his inner conflict, memories of his final call as a firefighter when he couldn't save a young woman, lingering in his expression. Halfway through the program, the MC announced a moment of special recognition for Bryce Jenkins, acknowledging his past service and the personal sacrifices he'd made. A ripple of applause spread across the auditorium. Bryce rose reluctantly, cheeks tinged red, giving a brief nod of thanks. Gracie felt a surge of pride for him. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar figure in the back, Thomas Montgomery, dressed impeccably, standing at the rear of the auditorium. Her heart pounded. Apparently, he hadn't abandoned his watch over her life. She glanced anxiously at Bryce. Should she tell him? As if reading her mind, Bryce followed her line of sight and tensed at the sight of Thomas. The program continued until, near the end, the MC invited people to share any personal tributes. Gracie's pulse hammered as she stood. Without quite planning it, she walked toward the small stage. Her legs felt unsteady, but a deep resolve pushed her forward. Taking the microphone, she cleared her throat. "My name is Gracie," she began, voice echoing slightly in the auditorium. "I'm not from Raleigh originally, but this city welcomed me at a time I had nowhere else to go." She glanced at Bryce. "Some months ago, I was stranded in a storm, frightened and alone. Bryce Jenkins stopped to help me, without asking any questions." Her voice trembled with emotion. "He didn't know my background or that I was running from my family's demands. He just helped because that's who he is." All around, the crowd listened intently. Liz and Samantha exchanged proud smiles, while Bryce gazed up at her, eyes reflecting both admiration and lingering vulnerability. Gracie took a shaky breath, determined to finish what she started. "I want to honor him publicly, because I realize now that not all heroes wear uniforms every day. Some of them walk away from the job, but never really lose the call to protect others. Bryce gave me a safe place to land, even when he learned about my complicated past. And if there's one thing I've learned from the firefighters in this city, it's that saving lives isn't just a job. It's a spirit of caring that goes beyond any title or profession." Tears brimmed in her eyes as she glanced toward the back of the hall. Thomas Montgomery stood frozen, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. "I'm also saying this because there's been a lot of misunderstanding and deception on my part. Tonight, I'm speaking the truth. Bryce, you rescued me more than once, and I'm grateful. I've caused you pain by hiding who I am, and if this is my only chance to set the record straight, then so be it." A hush enveloped the auditorium. Gracie's tears slipped free, but she let them fall, refusing to hide anymore. Slowly, she held out the microphone toward Bryce. He rose, hesitating for the briefest moment before walking onto the stage. As he joined her, the applause started, tentative at first, then swelled to a supportive roar. Thomas still hovered at the back, eyes dark, but in that moment, Gracie focused on the raw honesty she'd finally embraced, knowing she had found the courage to speak her truth, no matter who tried to silence her. And as Bryce stood beside her, she glimpsed the promise of forgiveness and hope shimmering through his steady gaze. A hush lingered, even as the applause in the auditorium subsided. Gracie stepped off the stage, trembling from the emotional weight of her speech. Bryce followed, his hand resting lightly at her back in a gesture of support. Samantha and Liz hurried over, eyes shining with pride. Yet, behind them, the tall figure of Thomas Montgomery lingered near the exit, his expression unreadable. Gracie sensed the pull of old loyalties versus newly forged bonds. She saw in Bryce's gaze both admiration and lingering pain, memories of the month she'd kept her identity concealed. But he stayed close, and that steadiness soothed her frayed nerves. The event soon wound down, and small groups started dispersing into the cool Raleigh night. Outside, the moon hung low over the parking lot, A gentle breeze played at Gracie's hair as she stepped onto the sidewalk. She felt raw, like she'd stripped her soul bare in front of an audience. Bryce was about to speak when Thomas cleared his throat behind them. Turning, Gracie saw her father's stern face. "Gracie," he began, voice laced with tension, "that was quite the performance." She steeled herself. "It wasn't a performance. It was the truth." Thomas's gaze shifted to Bryce, then back to her. "You've made your stance clear publicly. No one can say you lack nerve." His hand flexed at his side, the only sign he was grappling with frustration. "I came tonight to see if there was still a path back. Now." "I'm not sure." Liz and Samantha hovered nearby, poised to step in. Gracie knew they'd intervene if needed, but this was her confrontation to handle. "I meant every word," she said. "I won't marry Mitchell. I won't be part of a life that isn't my own." Thomas's jaw tensed. "You realize what you're doing, throwing away a fortune, a legacy, and a life of privilege. All for what? An ex-firefighter with no social standing." His tone bit at each syllable, though Gracie noted a tinge of regret behind the anger. Bryce bristled. Before he could reply, Gracie laid a gentle hand on his arm, stepping between them. "Father, I know exactly what I'm losing, but I'm also gaining something more valuable. My dignity, real friends, and a chance at love that isn't controlled by your deals." Thomas's gaze flicked over Samantha and Liz. There was a pause, a moment of visible calculation. Then he shook his head. "If you think living in a shabby inn and scraping by is the path to happiness, fine. I won't fight you in court yet, but I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your actions." Her heart hammered. She recognized a subtle shift in his tone. He sounded less wrathful, more resigned. "That's all I ask," Gracie managed. "Let me face my choices without interference." Thomas stared at her for a beat, then exhaled, turning away as if the conversation was too painful to continue. With a curt nod to no one in particular, he stepped off the curb and disappeared behind the tall outline of parked cars. Gracie's shoulders sagged with relief and an undercurrent of sadness. Liz and Samantha approached, their faces reflecting both hope and concern. Samantha spoke first, voice gentle. "You handled that with real courage. Are you okay?" Gracie swallowed. "I think so. I mean, it hurts. But it's what had to happen." Bryce slipped his hand into hers, drawing her closer. "I know that wasn't easy," he said softly. "You're shaking." She let him steady her, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. "I feel like I just walked through fire," she murmured. "You did," he replied. "And you came out on the other side." They parted ways with Liz and Samantha soon after, each heading home for the night. Gracie couldn't sleep, replaying the encounter with her father in her mind. She thought of all the times she'd sought his approval, only to feel unworthy. Now, though, she'd stood her ground. The flames of fear and self-doubt had threatened to consume her, yet she'd emerged with a heart ignited by truth, by self-possession, and by the kind of love she'd never experienced under her father's domain. In the stillness of her room at the inn, she let the tears of relief flow. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it no longer as a pawn, but as someone who had seized her own destiny, even if her heart still burned with the ache of a family torn apart. A calm settled over the Oak and Maple Inn in the weeks following the charity event. It was as though Thomas's departure had lifted a dark cloud. While Gracie doubted he'd surrendered entirely, she sensed he was giving her the space she'd demanded. She settled into her daily routine, welcoming guests, managing bookings, assisting Liz with anything the inn needed. Samantha became her closest confidant, and together they shared easy laughter over minor mishaps, like a leaky faucet or a cancelled reservation. The ordinary rhythm of innkeeping felt therapeutic, each small task reinforcing Gracie's newfound independence. One crisp morning, Gracie and Bryce met for coffee at a local diner. The sun warmed the checkered floors as they slid into a booth by the window. He took her hand across the table, a simple, intimate gesture that filled her with quiet happiness. They'd been taking things slowly. No grand declarations, just daily affirmations that they were in this together. "You look more at ease," Bryce observed, studying her face. "How are you holding up?" She smiled over the rim of her coffee cup. "Better. Still a little afraid of what my father might do, but I'm choosing not to live in constant fear." "Feels good." He nodded approvingly. "You deserve it." After a moment, he cleared his throat. "Listen, the fire department's hosting a training day soon, and they asked me to run a workshop. I haven't done anything official with them for a while, but I'm thinking of volunteering. It might be time." Gracie's eyes lit up. "Really? That's wonderful, Bryce. You were a great firefighter. I've heard it from so many people. Why not share that experience?" He hesitated, a faint shadow passing over his face. "I still have regrets about the life I couldn't save, but maybe it's time to channel those regrets into helping others be better prepared." She gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm proud of you." They spent the rest of the morning talking about small plans, weekend getaways, favorite foods, and the possibility of doing something special for Liz and Samantha as a thank you. Every topic felt laden with promise, each casual suggestion another thread weaving them closer. Back at the inn, Liz greeted Gracie with a secretive smile. "Got something to show you," she said, leading Gracie to the small patio out back. Potted plants lined the edges, and a few tables sat under a canopy of string lights. "We had a cancellation in our schedule, so I was thinking of hosting a little get-together for the folks in town who've become your friends. Kind of a welcome to your new life party." Gracie laughed, touched. That's so sweet. I mean, I haven't done anything special." Liz shook her head. "You've done plenty. You stood your ground, found your footing, and brought new energy to this place. Everybody's noticed." Warmth flooded Gracie's cheeks. She recalled her previous life, where gatherings were more about social climbing and impeccable etiquette. The idea of a simple party in a cozy backyard among genuine friends felt infinitely more precious. "I'd love that," she replied. Over the next few days, word spread among the inn's small circle. Samantha, Bryce, some of the firefighters who'd attended the charity event, and a handful of regular guests. On the chosen evening, twinkling bulbs illuminated the patio, and a buffet table held potluck dishes contributed by friends. Soft chatter and occasional laughter filled the air, the sense of camaraderie deeply comforting. As Gracie mingled, she realized how much had changed since the night she'd arrived with a flat tire in a storm. She was no longer just the woman in trouble. She was a friend, a co-worker, a supportive presence in their lives as well. Every greeting, every smile, reaffirmed that belonging wasn't about wealth or status, but shared experiences and genuine care. Later, Bryce took her aside, a gentle grin on his face. "Look at you," he teased. "Center of attention, and you didn't even have to wear a ball gown." She chuckled, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "This is what real happiness feels like, isn't it? It's so ordinary, yet so big." He nodded, eyes warm. "Yeah, and it's only the beginning." Gracie gazed around at the intimate gathering, the glow of lights reflecting in everyone's eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt completely grounded, convinced that a modest life built on honesty and love outshone any gilded cage she'd left behind. This was her new beginning, not just as Gracie Montgomery, but as a woman carving out her own future, one step, one friendship, one dream at a time. A few days after the backyard celebration, Gracie received a surprising phone call. It was from her father's personal secretary. a woman named Belinda, who had always been polite but distant. "Miss Montgomery," Belinda said in a carefully neutral tone, "your father requests a calmer meeting with you. No lawyers, no threats. He asks if you might be open to speaking with him. Alone." Gracie's heart raced, torn between lingering anger and a faint hope. "All right," she agreed quietly, "but on my terms. He can come to the Oak and Maple Inn, public space, no intimidation." Belinda hesitated. "I'll relay the message." 2 days later, Thomas Montgomery walked through the inn's front door, looking unexpectedly subdued. Gracie guided him to a quiet corner of the lounge, Samantha and Liz lingering discreetly nearby. Bryce was absent. He'd offered to step away, giving them the privacy Gracie might need. Thomas settled into a chair, his posture less rigid than before. "This place is simpler than I realized," he said, glancing around. "I can see why you might find comfort in it." She folded her hands in her lap, a swirl of emotions making it hard to speak. "It's more than comfort. It's home for now." He stared at her, expression unreadable. "I've been thinking since your speech at that charity event, watching you stand by that man, and then hearing of your so-called party in the backyard." His tone still carried a trace of disapproval, but there was something else. Resignation, perhaps. Gracie steeled herself. "I'm not sorry for any of it, Father." For a moment, he didn't reply, his gaze distant. Then he exhaled. "I spent my life building an empire. I expected you to inherit it, to carry on the Montgomery name with the proper alliances. Maybe I never considered that you wanted something else." His eyes flicked to her left hand, perhaps expecting to see an engagement ring that wasn't there. "I never saw you as an individual, just as the heiress I raised." Her chest tightened. She'd dreamed of hearing some semblance of admission from him, yet now that it came, it felt almost unreal. "I wanted your respect," she said, voice trembling. "Not the money or the status. Just for you to see me." Thomas rubbed a hand over his face, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "I can't pretend I understand all your choices, but I do know forcing you into a marriage and threatening the people around you was misguided." He glanced at the inn's cozy surroundings. "You've become stronger than I expected." Gracie swallowed, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I found support here, friends who believed in me. People who see me for who I am, not just my last name." He nodded slowly, the weight of his pride warring with a hint of regret. "I can't promise I'll stop wishing you'd come home, but if you truly prefer this life, I won't stand in your way anymore. At least, not with lawsuits or intimidation. Mitchell can deal with his own affairs." A tightness in Gracie's chest dissolved. "You really mean that?" Thomas tapped his cane against the floor, as though steadying himself. "Yes, I realize if I push harder, I'll only lose you entirely." He rose stiffly, his gaze catching hers. "You're an adult, and I will respect that." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, hesitantly, Gracie stood and stepped forward. She wasn't sure what gesture was appropriate, a handshake, a hug. In the end, she gently placed a hand on his arm, a bittersweet smile curving her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. He patted her hand once, then moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, glancing back as though searching for words. "Take care of yourself, Gracie." With that, he left, leaving behind an echo of wisdom that only time and hardship could have forged. Gracie stood in the quiet lounge, her breath unsteady. She realized that while this wasn't a warm reunion, it was an important shift. Sometimes healing came in small steps, an apology not fully formed, an acceptance not fully embraced, but enough to open a door. She wiped her tears, grateful to find that door finally cracked ajar. Several more weeks slipped by, bringing mild autumn winds to Raleigh. The Oak and Maple Inn remained a hub of comfort for travelers and a home base for Gracie's steady progress toward independence. News of her father's softened stance spread quietly, lifting an invisible burden from her shoulders. She no longer flinched at unknown calls or random black cars in the street. Bryce, in turn, embraced his volunteer role at the local fire station, offering training sessions and occasionally stepping in to cover shifts. Gracie noticed a gradual lightness in his demeanor, as though he'd finally found a way to honor his past without being chained by it. One afternoon, she watched him demonstrate rescue techniques to a group of rookies, his instructions clear and empathetic, her heart filled with pride. Their relationship deepened in gentle increments. Small weekend outings, shared breakfasts at the diner, evenings sitting on the inn's porch swing, discussing everyday joys and lingering fears. One night, after a cozy dinner at Marilyn's Cafe, Bryce took her for a walk under the twinkling streetlights of downtown Raleigh. Pausing by a quiet stretch of sidewalk, he turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You know," he said softly, "we've both been through our own fires, yours with your father and all that pressure, mine with losing that call I couldn't save, but we came out the other side, changed, maybe stronger." She nodded, heart thudding gently. "Yes, we did." He searched her eyes. "I want us to keep growing together, and I know we don't have to rush anything, but I need you to know, I love you, Gracie." She felt her breath catch, tears gathering unbidden. The simplicity of those words struck a chord deeper than any elaborate gesture she'd ever known. "Bryce," she whispered, "I love you too." She realized it was the first time she'd said those words with complete trust and no fear of what they might cost her. He drew her into a tender kiss beneath the glow of a nearby lamppost. The chilly air only made the warmth between them feel more profound. When they finally pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to his, a laugh of relief escaping her lips. "I never imagined it could be this easy," she said. He smiled, voice low. "After everything, maybe we've earned easy." Back at the inn later that night, Gracie sank into bed, replaying the moment over and over. Memories floated through her mind, the frightening storm that brought them together, the secrets she'd carried, the battles with Thomas. Each trial had tempered their bond like metal in a forge. She realized she was crying tears of gratitude, hugging her pillow with a sense of wonder. A few days later, Liz and Samantha orchestrated a modest gathering in the inn's yard once more. They called it a just because party, but everyone understood it was an unspoken celebration of Gracie's hard-won freedom and her blossoming romance with Bryce. Jake, the firefighter friend who first coaxed Bryce into attending the charity event, showed up with a big grin. Neighbors brought homemade desserts, and even Marilyn arrived with a tray of her famous blueberry muffins. As Gracie moved among the guests, she spotted Bryce by the grill, wearing a light-hearted smile that revealed he finally felt at peace. He caught her eye and beckoned her over. In that instant, amid the easy laughter and quiet acts of kindness from friends, she knew she'd chosen the right path. Once the party died down, they found a moment alone by the edge of the yard. Warm lights strung in the trees flickered softly overhead. Gracie rested her head on Bryce's shoulder, content to stand in silence. He slipped an arm around her waist. "You ever miss that old life?" he asked gently. She considered it. "There are times I miss small luxuries, but I'd never trade this feeling of belonging and honesty. All that glitters doesn't compare to real love and friendship." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Good, because I plan on keeping both of those in good supply." And so, in the glow of the hanging lights, they remained, two souls who'd been tested by flames, his from a past he couldn't outrun, hers from a family that sought to own her. Together, they had emerged renewed, with a love that was all the stronger for having been forged in adversity. Gracie closed her eyes, allowing that truth to bring a gentle tear to her cheek. This time, the tears were wholly joyful, for at last she'd found everything she never knew she needed: freedom, genuine affection, and the quiet certainty of a life on her own terms. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.